commemorating the 30th anniversary of the formation of the Visegrad Group. On the 15th of February 2021, the Visegrad Group celebrated its 30th anniversary. Although the regional corporation of the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland and Slovakia dates back to much earlier. Visegrad was chosen as the venue of the signing of the Visegrad Declaration in 1991 to commemorate the meeting of the three kings in 1335 who established an alliance. This commitment was renewed after transformation of the political system in Central Europe to improve the mutual cooperation and to make their region more visible in Europe. The V4 members reached several common goals by joining the NATO and the European Union, where they worked together to represent the regional interests while contributing to the stability and economic prosperity of the European continent. The V4 cooperates in a number of fields of common interest, including the Euro-Atlantic integration of the Western Balkans and the EU's Eastern Partnership countries. The V4 efforts are not limited to foreign affairs. From defense to agriculture, as well as culture and science, are also associated with this notion. Though the 30th anniversary coincides with an unprecedented global crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, it also creates an opportunity within the V4 cooperation for working in unity for a sustainable future.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers, dear audience, warm welcome to you all at the Visegrad Four Central Bank Governors Conference. My name is Edith Szalai and I am honored to be your host today. Due to the uncertainties of the pandemic, we meet in the virtual space, but I am sure this will not prevent us from having a dynamic and thought-provoking event. By organizing the very first V4 Central Bank Governors Conference, Magyar Nemzeti Bank, the Central Bank of Hungary, intends to highlight two crucial elements of its agenda: the importance of regional cooperation and the increasing role of the sustainability in economic policy making. The timing of the conference has a symbolic importance. In 2021, we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the establishment of the Visegrad Group. In addition to this landmark event, Hungary assumed the rotating presidency of the group on the 1st of July. Therefore, our event today stands for both occasions. The cooperation of the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland and Slovakia dates back to the 14th century, and it was institutionalized by the Visegrad Declaration signed 30 years ago. The V4 countries have proven their commitment to the regional cooperation numerous times, and the COVID-19 crisis created a new opportunity to join efforts for a sustainable recovery. The conference is organized under the theme of Gradual Transition into a Greener Economy, Challenges and Opportunities, and its program starts with a high-level opening session, allowing us to learn from the experiences of the V4 Central Bank governors and deputy governors. The high-level opening session will be followed by two panel discussions with the participation of senior decision-makers and renowned experts of the V4 countries. First of all, I am pleased to announce Mr. György Matolcsy, Governor of the Magyar Nemzeti Bank, the Central Bank of Hungary, who will deliver his opening address, with which our professional program commences.
Dear governors, dear deputy governors, dear colleagues, dear friends. On behalf of the whole business community of Hungary and of course on behalf of the leadership of the National Bank, I warmly welcome you all on the occasion of our 30th birthday. It is the Visegrad Group's 30th anniversary of the start, of the beginning of our mutual friendship, cooperation, and success story. May I just offer you just a quick recap of the last 3 decades in order to appreciate the success story we have now. It was just the beginning of the 90s when all our member countries became the members of the free world, I mean we initiated and launched the long and bumpy road from a common economy to a market economy. Also, we started the exactly long road from dictatorship, from the communist style, Soviet style dictatorship to democracy. It was a long way to Tipperary, as the English song says, but it was really a long way to both the market economy and democracy. Why don't we have just, again, a short recap of the story? The transition from a common economy to a market economy, by definition, seems to be a huge challenge for all the participants. In the case of our countries, it was really a bumpy road because there were two groups of countries. The first group of our Visegrad players, 3 out of the 4 countries, chose the right path to the future. You all chose the path of a gradual transition from the common economy to the market economy. There was only one member, my country, Hungary. We were forced to choose the so-called shock therapy in the beginning of the 90s. In the first at least half decade of the 90s was really very hard, was difficult to say the least. We lost 1.5 million jobs altogether due to the shock therapy. So for Hungary, but also for all the Visegrad member countries, the first steps, the first baby steps were strange. They were in uncharted waters, but you did well because in the European economy between 1989 and 1992, we witnessed crisis times. During crisis times, it is forbidden to choose shock therapy. Unfortunately, Hungary did it. We made that mistake. After that, there was no smooth way and path to the transition of our economies because we had the challenges of the so-called South Asian financial crisis between 1997 and 1999. It was, of course, a huge crisis in Asia, but it had an unfortunate hard impact on our economies as well. In the meantime, between the two beginning and final stages of the South Asian financial crisis, we had a crisis, a financial crisis in our neighborhood in Russia. On the 1st of August, 1998, we witnessed the outbreak of the Russian financial crisis. Of course, it was in the neighborhood, so it had, by definition, a huge impact on us. After 2000, just at the beginning, in April 2000, we had the collapse of Nasdaq, one of the most eminent and outstanding stock exchanges worldwide. It had, again, a huge impact on our economies because it ruined a lot of foreign direct investments, I mean the planned foreign direct investments in our economies. We joined almost together in the region, the European Union in 2004, just in the run-up to the accession to the European Union and after a couple of years after the agreement and joining the European Union, we had flourishing times, not in all the 4 countries, because in Hungary, an unfortunate change of power, change of government happened in 2002, and we had a catalogue of economic policy disasters in my country, resulting in huge twin deficits, new indebtedness, huge public debt figures, and of course, in the end of the day, we had to enter the new crisis that erupted, as we all witnessed it, in 2008 in September, firstly, by the collapse of Lehman Brothers, and after October, the only country within the Visegrad Group, that was Hungary, asking for help, asking for the financial toolkit of the International Monetary Fund. We survived all these calamities since 2010 in Hungary. We've been on the right path to recover our macroeconomic, healthy macroeconomic path, and also we managed to restart the catching up process by achieving a successful budget consolidation scheme. All in all, we, the first letter of the Visegrad Group, means victory. There is no doubt about the final victory of our countries because during this 30 years' time, during these 3 decades, we had many challenges, but we struggled through hard times. We rode through good times. We managed to benefit from FDIs. We managed to benefit from the grants of the European Union, but all in all, we managed to capitalize on our domestic resources, on our skilled labor force, and finally, we've got the success story. It's not the end of the story, of course not. The last 3 decades proved to be bumpy, challenging, sometimes really very difficult. But finally, we survived our history, and we are just on the right track to achieve a historic success, catching up with the Western European nations. And as we know, last time we were badly hit by the pandemic. The pandemic is not the only crisis. There are at least 3 crises in one: the health crisis, the economic crisis, and of course there is an emotional crisis within us, because there is fear. That is the single most important factor of all these crises. But when we have a look at all the macroeconomic figures of the European Union, we can be proud of our achievements in all Visegrad countries, in all the 4 countries. We managed to handle all these crises well. I am tempted to say that we proved to be a little bit better at this exercise. We managed to safeguard the macroeconomic stability of our countries. We benefited a lot from our emerging economies status, meaning that we had macroeconomic health and stability in our countries. By now, we are on the right track to achieve a historical success, but in order to have this new phase, this new stage, we've got a task to fulfill. It is green transition. It's a must. Just 3 decades ago, for all the 4 countries, it was a must to leave the Soviet bloc and to build up democracy and the market economy. It is also, again, a must to build up gradually and not via shock therapy a new green economy. So it is not just coincidence, it is deliberate choosing our main topic now, the gradual green transition. It is really telling. It is a green transition. It's a must to perform a green transition, and also it's a must. We have to make it gradually. We have to avoid the Hungary mistake made in the beginning of the 90s when we had to choose the shock therapy path. So I wish you all an extremely good conference, and I wish us all a gradual green transition from the present economy to the future one. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Matolcsi, for the interesting and inspirational introductory speech. As the first guest speaker of the high-level opening session, it is my pleasure to give the floor to Péter Kazimír, Governor of Národná banka Slovenska, the Central Bank of Slovakia.
Jó napot kívánok! Many thanks for inviting me to this debate, and it's my great pleasure to be here today. Being in Budapest in person would be even better. It's a pity we had to go virtual in the wake of the current developments. Our topic today, a gradual transition into a greener economy. Dornbusch's law states, the crisis takes a much longer time coming than you think, and then it happens much faster than you would have thought. This has been the case with the pandemic, and it might easily be the same case when it comes to climate change, I'm afraid. The recent crisis showed us how fragile our existence is and how a local problem originating on the other side of the planet can morph into a global one almost in the blink of an eye. Climate change, like viruses, doesn't affect only one single geography, borders, ideology, or currency. The location of greenhouse gases doesn't affect a single geography. It goes viral and causes damage around the globe. No exceptions, no questions asked. These global problems need global solutions. No single actor can solve this issue alone. There is an ongoing scientific consensus that climate change poses a serious threat for mankind and the economy. Industrialization and globalization lead to increased emissions. However, where we are sailing in the mist is how to effectively navigate our actions to tackle physical and transformation risks. Climate mitigation and adaptation policies could trigger revolution, sustainable revolution, a potential to shape the world. The carbon budget for staying below the 2 degrees Celsius threshold set by Paris agreements will be exhausted in about 25 years. Our advantage is that we know that climate change is irreversible. Trillions of dollars in investment will be required to transition the global economy to net zero emission and avert a climate catastrophe, just as industrial revolutions needed capital inflow and technological development. This represents a massive challenge to mobilize capital and a great opportunity for capital providers to finance new technologies and invest in the business models of the future. We need to swing the pendulum of economic forces to create strong incentives, R&D investments, mobilizing public and private capital, solution adaptation and mitigation policies, getting rid of obstacles. And the positives? Transformation brings growth, employment, and innovations. Climate change as a negative externality is a textbook example of market failure. Thus, governments have the most powerful instruments available: carbon pricing, taxing carbon content, and tradable permits to internalize it. Of course, central banks also have a role to play within their mandate. Central banks can help to understand the complexity of the issue, prevent underestimation of possible impacts, all before it is too little, too late. More than speeches, we need agreement on collective actions to build a sustainable and resilient economy for future generations. We are facing a critical moment. Our actions in the next 10 years will determine our future. The toll for inaction is increasing every moment, and we must not turn a blind eye to climate challenges. Failure to act now have ramifications on future generations. There will be no place to hide. No silver bullets. Put the collective efforts of the best minds in the world together to find acceptable solutions. Voluntary approach is not enough. Which brings me to last week's conclusion of our strategic review. We, I mean the ECB's Governing Council, recognize that climate change has profound implications for price stability and have therefore committed within the ECB's mandate to an ambitious climate-related action plan. First, we will further expand our analytical capacity in macroeconomic modeling and develop statistical indicators and new tools to assess the implications of climate change for monetary policy transmission and price stability. Second, the ECB will introduce environmental sustainability disclosure requirements for eligibility for collateral and asset purchases. And third, we will adapt our risk assessment framework and our corporate sector purchases and the collateral framework for climate-related risks. The implementation of the action plan will be in line with the progress on European Union policies and initiatives in the field of environmental sustainability disclosure and reporting, including the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the Taxonomy Regulation, and the Regulation on Sustainability-related Disclosures in the financial services sector. I will conclude with the words of President Lagarde. We are not driving the bus, but we are on that bus. It's not just a word, it's a commitment of the Government Council to act, and a pretty large step forward. Action has already started. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Kazimir, for the engaging speech. As the next presenter and speaker, I am glad to announce Mr. Jiří Rusnok, Governor of Česká národní banka, Central Bank of the Czech Republic.
Distinguished governors, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I am sorry I can't be with you in person in Budapest today, but work commitments unfortunately prevent me from attending. Let me nonetheless address the conference and make a few remarks at least through this channel. You have come together in Budapest today at the invitation of our esteemed colleague Governor Matolcsy to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the establishment of the Visegrad countries group. Following fall of communism in our countries at the turn of the 1990s, our region found itself in a geopolitical vacuum. Our political representatives therefore decided entirely naturally, right at the outset, to share and coordinate the process of joining European and Atlantic organizations with our closest neighbors. All our countries faced very similar problems and challenges. Our mutual support proved very useful in the difficult period of transformation of our societies and economies. 30 years have since passed. We are now a firm and very successful part of the European integration project and of the North Atlantic Alliance. But this doesn't mean we no longer face tough tasks and related challenges today. Our mutual cooperation has proved its worth, and it is vital that it continues. Everything I have said so far applies equally to the cooperation between our countries' central banks. 3 of our countries are currently outside the euro area and have their own monetary policy. This, notwithstanding, what happens in the eurozone is also crucial for us in the Czech Republic, and for our colleagues in Hungary and Poland, as all our economies are very strongly integrated with the Eurozone. Turning to today's specific topic of theme of greening of central banks' activities. I must admit that I have been following this debate with some misgivings or embarrassment, if you like. The independent and exceptionally strong position of the central banks in our countries is backed robustly by the narrow and precise formulation of our mandates. The independent central bank model in place in advanced democratic countries is based on historical experience and best international practice. Central banks are tasked with maintaining price and financial stability. To fulfill this mandate, they have been given extremely strong powers. However, I am convinced that this strong mandate or competence must go hand in hand with accountability. I am therefore rather wary of widening our mandate to cover even such virtuous objectives as combating climate change and social inequality. In Czech Republic, we have quite a recent experience. Our central bank law recently underwent an extensive amendment after a several-year-long debate in Parliament. The revised law has significantly expanded our powers in the area of open market operations to enable us to maintain price and financial stability in a situation of extraordinary external and internal shocks. It has also bolstered our regulatory portfolio in the field of macroprudential policy. However, it contains no mandate for us to become a key player in environmental protection or the fight against climate change. The law says that without prejudice to our primary objective of price and financial stability, we must support the economic policies of the government. That is something we do rigorously and consistently. So in this respect, we are supporting also environmental goals of our government. We therefore stick to a rather conservative interpretation of our mandate, and we don't try to get involved in other competencies typically allocated to the government, which is the only authority vested with the legitimacy to pursue such objectives by our freely elected parliament. On climate change policy more generally, I believe we should act smart and avoid doing more harm than good with an overly passionate and zealous approach. If this activist policy were to disturb the macroeconomic balance, the subsequent restoration of balance could easily have such adverse consequences for the climate and society that the overall outcome could be very negative. I therefore advocate a sensible and smart approach, one that involves meeting the necessary climate and environmental goals while not destroying the key parameters of macroeconomic balance. Let me end by wishing you a fascinating debate at your conference there in Budapest today. I look forward to meeting you in person at some point in the future and to furthering the cooperation between our central banks. Have a great day.
Thank you, Governor Rusnok, for the stimulating welcome speech. Finally, it is my pleasure to invite Ms. Marta Kajtli, Vice President and First Deputy President of Narodowy Bank Polski, the Central Bank of Poland, to deliver her keynote speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to deliver a keynote address during the conference commemorating the 30th anniversary of the formation of the Visegrad Group. There is no doubt that the long-lasting cooperation within the Visegrad Group has strengthened political, economic, and cultural ties between our countries. Therefore, at the beginning, let me thank the Magyar Nemzeti Bank and Governor György Matolcsy for the invitation and organizing this important event. With the COVID pandemic hopefully subsiding, we can gradually turn our attention to more long-term challenges. Gradual transition into a greener economy is certainly one of them. The use of cheap energy from fossil fuels has underpinned the impressive improvement in the standard of living in many countries over the recent 150 years. Today, most people have access to electricity and heating, and they do not suffer hunger and live longer than they did centuries ago. However, the improvement in the standard of living has also brought a rapid growth in greenhouse gases emissions. As an economist and central banker, I will not discuss the effects of growing emissions on climate. I will leave it to climatologists and physicists. Instead, I will focus on the implications of climate change and environmental policies on economies and central banks' policies. Let me start with the climate policies. So far, around 60 countries have already pledged to be emission neutral by mid-century, with the EU being a clear forerunner in this respect. At the same time, governments of advanced countries and international organizations push for a shift to a more green energy mix also among emerging and developing countries. The latter countries are, however, more dependent on traditional sources of energy. Thus, they raise a bitter voice of concern, pointing that such transition may undermine their competitiveness and impede economic growth. There is no doubt that the transition to a greener economy will change how we produce and what we produce. It might lead to a reshuffle of global value-added chains. For the Visegrad Group countries, where convergence in recent decades has been led by exports, this creates both risk and opportunities. For example, demand for petrol or diesel cars and their components that are produced in our countries may come to a halt, while demand for electric cars and their components will rise. In fact, Polish exports of lithium-ion batteries to electric cars in 2020 increased by 100%, and Poland has become the largest exporter of this product in the EU. Climate change and climate policies will not only have an impact on real economy, but also on the financial sector. Financial institutions with significant exposure to carbon-intensive sectors could face losses due to impairment of loan collateral and corporate value. At the same time, exposure to high-intensive carbon sector may make some financial institutions vulnerable to reputational risks. According to NBP's primary estimates, in Poland, the risk due to direct exposures appears relatively small and manageable, notwithstanding the fact that fossil fuels account for a large share in the Polish energy mix. Banks' exposures to high emission entities do not exceed 2% of total banking sector assets. Moreover, the loans are mostly short-term, which allows banks to manage their exposure. However, financial sector may be also exposed to indirect risks related to climate policies and climate change. Looking ahead, energy prices may increase further and consumption patterns may change in the economy. Some companies may be particularly exposed to an increase in energy costs, even if their direct emissions are low. Analyzing the indirect impact of climate risk on the financial sector is, however, challenging. The main challenge results from the lack of comprehensive reporting on climate-related issues and taxonomy that would allow to assess which undertakings are brown or green. Let me move to another economic dimension of the transition into a greener economy. It has been widely discussed that climate change may have a long-term effect on inflation through, for example, food prices that may become more volatile due to more frequent extreme weather events. The impact is, however, indirect and hard to estimate. In turn, the effects of EU climate policies are direct and already clearly visible in inflation developments. The emission trading system, which makes polluting energy sources more expensive, remains a cornerstone of the EU climate policies. While the EU ETS provides incentives to shift energy mix towards green technologies from a monetary policy perspective, it should be analyzed through the lens of negative supply side shock that leads both to higher inflation and lower output. This is exactly the kind of shock that is least convenient to central banks. In Poland, where coal accounts for a significant part of the energy mix, the impact of the EU ETS on energy prices and inflation has been significant. As we are still in the very beginning of our journey towards the net zero target, we may expect that the EU climate policy is likely to push energy prices and inflation in Poland higher in the years to come. But does it mean that the central banks should be actively involved in the climate policies? It is widely agreed that the driving seats in this field belong to the governments. They are democratically elected, and thus they have the strong legitimacy to pursue climate policy, which in the end of the day revolves around favoring certain economic branches and business and penalizing others. And as I mentioned earlier, many governments have already stepped on the accelerator. However, some policymakers believe that the governments have agreed to do still comes short of what is necessary to ward off climate risk. They call for using central banks' tools to actively support climate policy pursued by the governments. I will argue, however, that the central banks should not follow this avenue. First, central banks do not have mandates to actively pursue climate policies. If there is one thing that most economists can fully agree on, it is probably that central banks should be independent and their primary aim should be to maintain price stability. This view is reflected in the mandates that have been granted to central banks and high level of independence of central banks in the institutional architecture. Some claim that the moderate mandate of a central bank to support transition into a green economy could be inferred from a broad objective that central banks usually have, such as supporting government's economic policy. However, it would be uncommon for a central bank to pressure government in pursuing certain policies and take a lead. It should be expected that it is the government who leads public policy in areas other than price stability. And central banks can support the policies of the government insofar it does not jeopardize their primary objective. Otherwise, the question of democratic legitimacy could arise and ultimately threaten the independence of central banks. Second, central banks have hardly any instrument to effectively support transition into a greener economy. Some postulate that asset purchase programs that are conducted currently by the central banks should be tilted towards green assets. However, we need to remember that asset purchases are not a permanent tool of central banks. While today many central banks are conducting asset purchase programs, at some point in the future, achieving the inflation target may require selling the assets that central banks have already accumulated. If a central bank purchases green assets, it needs to be prepared to sell them in the future. Otherwise, it may compromise the price stability objective. Furthermore, to be effective, asset purchases cannot be sector-specific. In principle, central bank conducts asset purchases to ensure easy financial conditions in the whole economy. The aim of the purchases is not to penalize or favor specific sectors. Of course, many central banks incorporate green bonds into their asset purchase programs. However, it is done in a market-neutral way, as so to avoid creating market distortions. That said, it needs to be underlined that research shows that markets already seem to be reward companies that take steps to improve the ECG practices with more favorable financing conditions. At the same time, in many jurisdictions, including in Poland, launching a green quantitative easing would face a number of technical obstacles. Information about carbon footprint of issuers is often lacking, and green bonds market is shallow. In Poland, government has issued so far green bonds worth less than 4 billion euros, which amounts to about 1.7% of total bonds issued by the Treasury. There are only a few issues of green bonds by the corporate sector. At the same time, it is unclear what scale of green quantitative easing would be necessary to achieve climate targets in coherence with other priorities of public and social policies. Moreover, the NBP decided not to extend the asset purchases to corporate bonds at all because it is a very small market. Such purchases would not have affected the effectiveness of our monetary policy while generating significant credit risk. While I'm skeptical whether central banks should be actively involved in pursuing climate policies, I also believe that central banks should not ignore climate change and climate policies that are pursued by the governments. Central banks, similar to all institutions, especially public ones, should be environmentally and socially responsible. Clearly, climate policies and climate risks should be incorporated by the central banks in modeling, forecasting, and risk assessment. NBP has been already developing tools to this end. Central banks may also support policies undertaken to reach climate neutrality. However, they need to ensure it does not jeopardize their price stability objective and their independence. NBP has been occasionally buying foreign green bonds as part of reserve management, yet driven mostly by risk-return considerations. Moreover, green bonds might be pledged as collateral within the refinancing operations of the central bank, however, also on non-preferential terms. To conclude, central banks are bound by the clear mandates and they are independent in pursuing them. Therefore, regardless of how tempting joining the active fight against the climate change may seem, they should not set policy goals that remain beyond their remit, especially as they have hardly any tools to achieve them. Central banks should instead focus primarily on what they can do and what they are mandated to do, which is to stabilize inflation at low levels, support balanced economic growth, and financial stability. This is the best way they can support welfare of their citizens. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Vice President Keightley, for the truly intriguing address. With the speech of Ms. Marta Keightley, we have reached the end of our first session today. Now a short break is coming up, but I encourage you to stay close to the screens as our breaks feature excellent videos, various MMB events, and other specialties. After the 10-minute recess, we come back with a panel discussion with excellent speakers representing the V4 countries' central banks. Stay with us for a deeper insight on the challenges of climate change and green transition from the central banking point of view.
Planet Earth is our home and our most valued treasure. It is the responsibility of today's society to preserve it for generations to come. Humanity is continuously seeking ways to do more in this regard. And Hungary, as well as MNB, must play its part in these efforts. According to an international survey, our country is currently the 19th amongst the European Union countries in terms of progress towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We still have much to accomplish in terms of clean energy, tackling climate change, and the protection of terrestrial ecosystems. In addition, relative to other European Union countries, our economy is more vulnerable to environmental issues. All this clearly shows that we must restructure our economy, in which MNB plays a key role by facilitating the financing of investments. We must support the adaptation of the economy and mitigate the consequences of climate change, as well as reduce the funding of activities harmful to the environment. To this end, in 2019, MNB established the Green Programme to support the domestic financial sector in measuring, managing, and reducing the risks arising from climate change and other environmental degradation. We formulated new recommendations and regulations to reduce these risks, as well as to expand green finance. Furthermore, 2020 saw the introduction of an innovative preferential capital treatment for housing loans to enable commercial banks to provide favorable mortgage loans for energy-efficient properties. In the corporate segment, MNB has been focusing on renewable energy and corporate green bonds by expanding the preferential treatment scheme, while also placing special emphasis on capacity building. The Green Programme is also aimed at providing market players with an appropriate supply of professionals and expertise. In this regard, MNB is cooperating with various organizations to support multiple domestic and international training programs. And thanks to its professional assistance, 4 Hungarian universities have launched green finance courses. Apart from MNB's measures, the European Union regulations and global initiatives are also rapidly shaping our lives. The changes which have been set in motion might allow us to leave the planet in a better shape for the future generations.
Geopolitics, History, Economics. The book titled American Empire versus European Dream by György Matolcsy, the governor of the Central Bank of Hungary, has been released. Providing a broad perspective, it analyzes the process of how the American empire became the world's #1 superpower, what motivations other major players in geopolitics had, how the European Union attempted to compensate the hegemon status of the American empire, and how the European dream shattered at the dawn of a new world order. You can find the answers to these questions, as well as many important and topical issues, in György Matolcsy's new book, which has already achieved international success. The book is available in bookstores or online, in the webshop of Paulus Athéné Publishing House, or on Amazon.com.
Dear audience, welcome again at the Visegrad Four Central Bank Governors Conference. After the remarkable speeches of the high-level opening session, we move to our first panel discussion focusing on central banks and their role in combating climate change.
The role of central banks in combating climate change. Climate change poses an exceptional risk to our society. Weather-related disasters have become more frequent, and the related economic costs are also growing steadily. Central banks worldwide face significant threats, as climate change has enormous effects on the macroeconomic trends. There has been an increasing number of pioneering central banks that are committed to meet these climate-related challenges. Do central banks need to be involved in climate policy? What kind of instruments can central banks use in the fight against climate change? What are the impacts of climate change on the main tasks of central banks?
I am pleased to welcome Mr. Daniel Palotai, Executive Director of the International Monetary Fund, on the stage as the moderator of the panel, and our distinguished speakers joining from the V4 central banks. Dr. Csaba Kandrács, Deputy Governor, Magyar Nemzeti Bank, the Central Bank of Hungary. Mr. Cezary Kochalski, Member of the Monetary Policy Council, Narodowy Bank Polski, the Central Bank of Poland. Mr. Marek Mura, Deputy Governor, Česká národní banka, the Central Bank of the Czech Republic. Mr. Ludovít Ódor, Deputy Governor, Národná banka Slovenska, the Central Bank of Slovakia. Mr. Palotai, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome here. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be moderating a panel discussion with such distinguished audience. And I would very much enjoy if you would be here physically, but it's also good to see you over the screen, as we have been used to this over the last year. Nevertheless, it shouldn't prevent us to having a vivid discussion on a highly interesting topic, which is the role of central banks in combating climate change. If you would recall, 5 or 6 years ago, we didn't have such a dossier as climate change on central banks' agenda. And I think the Paris Agreement made a significant change here. That's when the NGFS was established. And if we would look across the landscape, the central bank's landscape now, I think we have some 92 members in the central banking community who are members of the NGFS already. So obviously, a lot have happened in the last couple of years. I can also tell you from the International Monetary Fund's perspective that sustainability has become a key focus of the fund. We have been discussing sustainability issues, including climate issues, more recently, and I can tell you that the membership is a bit divided on these issues. So I'm wondering whether we could highlight to the audience how our countries are thinking about the central bank's role in climate change. Actually, some of you would ask, do we have a role to play here? Some of you, I guess, will have very strongly positive responses. Others might raise more question marks. So I'm really looking forward to what you have to say on this. I wouldn't like to waste much time here, so let me start with the questions. The first, I would ask you whether you think a central bank has a role to play here. Maybe I would give the floor in the order of the introduction. So let's start with Deputy Governor Kondracs. Deputy Governor, do we have a role to play here? Of course, I know the answer, but you will have to say, but better to hear from you personally.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel, and it's a real honor to be part of this discussion, and hello everybody. Yes, indeed, we plan to meet personally, and I'm pretty sure that it would have more time. We could discuss this topic deeper, and because I know that the views are a little bit different, but turning to the Hungarian Central Bank approach, our answer to the climate change is definitely yes. That we have a role. We think that certainly we have to we have to task to do something in connection with the climate change. There is scientific consensus about the disruptive effects of climate change on the environment, and it's also that such effects will undoubtedly spiral into our economic systems also, and the financial sector is not an exception from this. So economic literature has shown that there are multiple transmission channels of the so-called physical risks and transition risks of climate change to the financial system. And we consider it as a minimum that central banks now take action to assess the potential impact of climate risk through such transmissional channels and start to think about mitigation measures also. And the MNB also thinks that there is a case for going beyond this minimum and taking a more proactive approach with policy tools that enable the financial sector to start and then accelerate the decarbonization. For the MNB, this approach is in line with the recently acquired green mandate, what we got from our parliament recently. And another important factor is that I think there is an evolution, what you also mentioned in your first thoughts, that usually the supervisory part of the central banks active or was active in the first phase, as now, as I experience, it's scaling over the whole central bank functions or the central banks, and now it arrived in the monetary policy also, who deals with the climate issues also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Deputy Governor Csaba. I take this as a strong yes, your answer. Let's move on and see what our colleagues and friends think about this issue in Poland. Mr. Koczarski, I'm wondering whether you think central banks should play a role in mitigating climate change.
Thank you very much. The question is absolutely crucial and very, very important. But at the beginning, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to participate in this meeting. The fact that we discussed the problem of transition into a greener economy, finally not at a meeting in beautiful Budapest, not in the form of a face-to-face meeting, but online, means that COVID-19 pandemic is still dangerous. But may it happen that COVID as a source of uncertainty will be going away, and we will have an opportunity for a longer discussion, because it is very difficult to give an answer in a few minutes. I also would like to underline clearly that my today's opinions, of course, do not represent the official position of Narodowy Bank Polski, also the Monetary Policy Council, of which I'm a member. But moving on to your question, I will begin very briefly with referring to the situation related to COVID-19 and what happened in central banking, in particular in Poland. This is important to my answer. The available data increasingly proves that economies are more and more able to adapt to functioning under pandemic conditions. This year, the recovery in economic activity continues, even in the global. I hope the next waves of pandemic will not change that. What is important to a large extent, it has happened due to the decisions and actions of central banks. Please forgive me for the digression, but I remember saying in my bank a very important sentence during many discussions in my bank in times of crisis, that everyone has to do own thing. I mean, every institution has to do what belongs to it. Every institution has to do what belongs to it. Bearing in mind the experience of the 2008, financial crisis, as well as the COVID-19 COVID pandemic crisis. This is why we reduced interest rates very quickly. We started asset purchases on the secondary market. We lowered the level of required reserves, and we offered a bit of exchange loan in Poland. We can say that we have made non-conventional activities and decisions. Importantly, these actions were effective, as shown by the main economic parameters. We expected GDP growth of around 5% in the coming years in Poland. And we have inflation under control, although it is currently relatively high in terms of the inflation target. In the context of what I already said, one could say that the broad involvement of the central bank in the fight against the crisis has brought positive results. And that is, of course, it is indisputable. But today, we want to discuss the possible involvement of central bank in the process of transition into a greener economy. For me, the process of transition into a greener economy is not equivalent to a crisis. Since for me, this process of transition into a greener economy is not equivalent to crisis, but of course very important, I don't think that the central bank should be explicitly asked specific expectations in this regard. Saying everyone has to do what belongs to should rather mean something else in this case. And let me make some arguments. We hear a lot about climate change lately. It all sounds very often very scary. I don't disregard the voices warning against the consequences of climate change, not at all. But I also know that it is the central banks that central banks are responsible for global climate change. Once again, I come back to the saying, Everyone has to do what belongs to it. I understand, of course, that the times change. As central bankers, we also know that acting under the influence of emotion is not always the best. Looking at the problem from the economic point of view, we should not take the risk of experimenting. Economics is not an experimental discipline. Also, central banking should not be like that. Of course, this does not mean that we should wave our hands to climate change. Rather, I want to underline that there are many threats, not only related to climate changes. Moreover, we are not sure that the financial commitment of central banks will bring the expected results. Can we, for example, afford to finance or refinance the cost of investments that are supposed to reduce emissions, but finally will not significantly reduce emissions? What I'm saying does not mean that the central bank should not be interested in climate change and in the consequences for the economy. We cannot ignore them. I agree in general that green economy may contribute to the growth of wealth by reduction of emissions, by increasing the efficiency of energy and resource use, by preventing losses in ecosystems. But I also believe that activities in these fields can be planned. If they can be planned, I think the government has a leading role in implementing these plans. It is a fiscal sphere. Going back to what I said at the beginning, the crisis could not be planned, but the fight against climate change can be. I share the need for economic planning and the implementation of projects in terms of climate protection, but this is not the domain of central bank. However, I can imagine the support of central bank, but that would require more concrete projects. I also assume that green projects may differ in our countries. We are economists, so we know that generally green economic concept appeared 30 years ago. At the same time, processes of changes in our economy started. What I mean, the starting point is different for our countries and is very important in our attitude to the climate change politics. So the final sentence is that we shouldn't agree the climate risk. We don't agree, but the main role belongs to the government. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very valuable insight, and it was very interesting to hear from you how you perceive central banks' role changing since the global financial crisis. As you mentioned, those were crisis times, and central banks reacted to crisis impact with new measures, and of course they had to try new things. And it was also interesting to hear from you that climate change is maybe not exactly the same type of crisis as what central banks have been facing over the last decade. I will come back to you in the next round of questions, but let's now move on to see the whole landscape. So I would ask Deputy Governor Odor what he thinks from his central banking point of view, whether there is a role to play, or maybe he could even say a little bit from a euro area point of view. I mean, we know that in this group we have one euro area member, and it will be interesting to see how that question is analyzed within the euro system. Mr. Odor, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to this quite interesting discussion, I would say, because in many cases central banks do completely agree on things. So this is a rare occasion that we can really exchange views and discuss interesting aspects of it. And, you know, maybe also that we are now in cyberspace and not physically in Hungary means that actually we are saving some carbon emissions here through this conference. So I think this also shows some aspect of it. But you know, from my perspective, I would say clearly central banks cannot ignore climate change. That is, I think, self-evident for all of us in this panel, since there are quite important changes to the nature of risk in the economy, sectoral changes, GDP price changes. So even if we completely ignore in terms of you know, policy action, climate change cannot be ignored in terms of the economic development all over the world. So I also agree with those who are saying that there is no primary role for central banks to play. The primary burden should fall on governments, and central banking policy is usually a cyclical policy, and here we are talking about a secular, many decades trend. So from that perspective, we should be clear that, you know, the primary responsibility should lie with governments. Of course, that does not mean that we have no responsibility at all. And I would like to mention at least 4 aspects where we can play some role also in policy or policy-related questions. The first one is a kind of, I call it awareness and understanding. So we need a much better understanding of the phenomena. We need to collect data. We need to change models. We need to communicate to the public. We are, you know, important players in the economy, so we should communicate quite clearly that what's going on, what are the aspects, who should do what, and so on. So this awareness aspect is very important. Of course, those central banks who also have supervisory roles, they should make sure that the risks are fully taken into account in the financial sector. So that is, of course, very important, either through stress testing or, you know, setting up procedures for monitoring climate changes. This is an avenue to pursue. And I also call a third bunch of you know, potential actions as a nudging policy. So even if we do not have a primary responsibility, if we understand the nature of risk, we can nudge some of the players in order to move towards the direction we want, whether regarding investment decisions or you know, even macroprudential tools. But here we should be careful, and we should analyze the pros and cons of all those decisions, because you know, we still do not have enough data in many aspects to have a clear understanding what's going on, like with the traditional monetary policy transmission mechanism. And the fourth point I would like to make, where we can play a role, is a kind of a leading by example aspect. So maybe also central banks as institutions should make plans how to transition our organizations towards climate or neutral entities. So I see these 4 aspects where we can play a role, but I would like to underline once again that the primary responsibility is definitely not with us. And regarding your question to the European policies, so actually we are launching a kind of action plan for you know, green policies, and in the coming years we will delve more deeply into some aspects of you know, even not only non-monetary portfolios, but we would like to analyze also potential roles to play, for example, in collateral policies or you know, corporate QE. But at this stage, nothing definite had been decided. But as I mentioned, there is a scope for nudging, and we need to understand where can be more helpful in the future. So that is a kind of a high-level overview where I see potential role for central banks to play.
Thank you. That was very interesting, and I very much like the point you made that the role which makes the divide between central banks' involvement could be whether they have any supervisory roles in the financial sector. And I take your answer as those central banks who are not responsible for supervision might not have to deal with mitigating climate change in the finance sector, but maybe those who do have a supervisory role should have a larger role to play here. Before I will move on to the next question, I would also want to seek the views of Deputy Governor Mora from the Czech Republic.
So good morning to everybody. Let me first thank Magyar Nemzeti Bank for this great initiative, and let me also express my deep regret that we cannot meet in person in Budapest, which would be, of course, much better. Ludovic Odor is, of course, right that like this we are contributing to decreasing the CO2 emissions, but I still think that next time it should be our choice if we meet or not, and it should not, hopefully, it will not be dictated by something like a COVID-19 virus. To me, your question, Daniel, is a very important one, and it is indeed linked to the question, what is and what is not a central bank, or what a central bank should be. You mentioned, and some of my predecessors mentioned, that central banks follow several goals, several objectives, and we see that already now some of these objectives might be conflicting. Even within the monetary policy mandate, there are central banks who do not follow only price stability, but they also have the employment mandate, and obviously we know as economists that there might be conflicts between these two objectives. But on top of that, there might be conflicts between price stability and financial stability. You know, some central banks have other responsibilities like consumer protection, bank resolution, etc. And all that have been actually debated in the central bank community. Remember the debate after the great financial crisis in the ECB, when they got the new mandate on microprudential supervision, and the talk that there should be a Chinese wall between the supervisory department of the ECB and the monetary policy department. And now, we see this whole story with the climate change, which adds, in my view, to these conflicts. If I remain with the main original mandates of the central banks, which is monetary policy and financial stability, in both these areas, central banks act counter-cyclically. Ludovic mentioned it, either within the business cycle, in the case of monetary policy, or within the financial cycle. Of course, we know a bit less about the length and the nature of the financial cycle, but still, central banks mainly play a stabilization role. In the case of climate change, I think we deal with an issue which is clearly structural. It is long-term. I would even say it's very long-term, with important consequences for reallocation of capital and labor, with important redistributive consequences, with very difficult trade-offs. And in my view, such structural issues should remain in the hands of elected representatives, who are the only ones who have, first, legitimate mandate to decide about the trade-offs, which I mentioned. And second, they also have, in my view, much better instruments in their hands to combat climate change. We as central banks, we are very powerful, but we are unelected institutions. And therefore, in my view, we have limited mandates. So to come to an end, it is an important question, a very difficult question. The majority of central bank does engage in the field of climate change, some of them very actively, and not only in the way to try to understand the risks stemming from the climate change, which obviously is an issue for everyone, and I think on this we agree, but many central banks actually try to, let's say, to combat actively climate change or to go against global warming. They actively develop instruments by which they try to change the course of climate change and to mitigate global warming. And this is, in my view, really going beyond our mandates. So it seems that we are divided as central banks, maybe even within this small community of Visegrad central banks. Two of us are members, two of you are members of the Network for Greening the Financial System. Two of us are not members. So obviously there are differences. Let me repeat what my governor said in his introductory speech to this conference. He said, and I agree fully to this, that strong independence really goes hand in hand with very limited mandates, and enlarging and expanding our mandates could endanger our independence. Let me remind you that there are several academicians who warn against this development, mostly because they see the engagement of central banks in climate change as a potential danger for our independence. You know, there are such names like Charles Goodhart, Perry Eichengreen, Ottmar Issing, and some others, just to mention a few. So to come to an end with this introduction, I think we as central bank should analyze the risks and the consequences for our policies of climate change, but we should not try with our policies to influence climate change. And just a very final word, all this talk, in my view, is not about climate change if we believe it or not, but I think it is really about the role of a central bank. Thank you very much for this introduction.
Thank you very much, Deputy Governor. Yes, you belong also to the more conservative central bankers in this panel. I would say one very strongly positive and three more conservative responses, which of course doesn't tell us who is right on this question. To better understand, I would ask a follow-up question to all of you. So how do you see environmental and climate-related risks in the financial system and financial sector in your jurisdictions? I'm not asking about whether the central banks should be dealing with it, but do you see that such risks are prevalent in your jurisdictions in the financial sector, and can you measure them? Are they comparable to other types of risks, and what is the magnitude of these risks? If you could maybe shed light on these, that would be much appreciated. And now I would like to turn around to the table. So let's start with Deputy Governor Mora again, if you don't mind, of course.
No, of course I don't mind. Thank you. I do not think that there would be important differences among our jurisdictions on this issue. We, as a Czech National Bank, we are really at the beginning. We started with our financial stability report this year, where we had a box on climate-related risks. Our general approach in this area is basically to be an adapter or imitator. So we are looking around what the others are doing who are more advanced. We have by no means an ambition to be a leader or pioneer in this area. Of course, both risks of climate change are relevant for financial stability or for us, because we are also a financial stability institution in the Czech Republic. So the first group of risks are those direct material risks, linked to droughts and floods, strong winds. We had very recently a tornado in South Moravia with very, very severe consequences. So this is definitely an issue, and this is something which we are really, we started really looking into. But there are also transition risks. How the transition to a low carbon economy will affect our economies. It will obviously have immense consequences for capital stock, for labor. And this transition is either induced by a change of consumer behavior, so it's spontaneous and it's already going on, or it is also induced by governments, by our action or by the actions of our government. So I think, in my view, the second group of risks will play a far bigger role over time, and we have to get ready. But as I said at the beginning, we just really started looking into it.
Thank you. That was very clear. Deputy Governor Odor.
Yes, this is actually something we are looking into recently, quite intensively. So in terms of the financial sector and the direct or physical risks, we are mainly looking into the insurance sector, where these types of risks can bring a lot of changes. And what we are trying to design is a kind of a stress testing and environmental stress testing, what can happen, whether the volatility of events is different, the frequencies, factors, and so on. So these are very important empirical questions, and we are now in the phase of understanding and building models. As Marek mentioned, from maybe the Visegrad Four countries' perspective, the transition risk is much more important since it relates to a bigger part of our economies, especially since we are heavily driven by value added in the industry sector, and even in some countries, like in Slovakia, steel production. So in that case, the transition will mean a lot of structural and sectoral changes in the economy, and this of course has a direct consequence on also on the banking sector, which is financing all those corporations. So from that perspective, what we are doing is trying to assess the portfolios of the banking sector primarily related to climate intensive sectors, which is like 25% at this stage of bank loan portfolio, which is quite significant. So this is why we need to understand what will happen, and not only related to a kind of autonomous transition, but also in relation to policies in the European Union, at least in terms of the goals which we should achieve in the medium run. But also there are some opportunities. For example, the Recovery and Resilience Fund puts a lot more emphasis on the green transition, so there will be funds available. And also some of our commercial banks are going in that direction. So from that perspective, we need to understand not only the risk, but there are also opportunities for the corporate sector to deal with these questions. So these are the two areas where we think the immediate job is important. So in these two areas, we are working hard to understand better the changes, and this is maybe it from for the other parts of the financial sector, like asset managers and so on. There is some discussions about ratings like ESG, but this is, I would say, at the very beginning, and we do not foresee in the next few years that we will have substantial changes in regulation or something related to that. Of course, if there is more appetite from the investors' side, that of course will mean that those asset managers will move towards those policies. But from a supervisory perspective, that is not something we should be worried about. So that we leave it as it is right now.
Thank you very much, Deputy Governor. It was very interesting to hear that you mentioned also ESG. And if we have time, then maybe in the end, I would ask whether your central banks do have a policy for ESG, or whether your central banks are investing parts of the reserves in green assets. And that would be interesting if you can share these thoughts with us. But let's now move on and continue to the table regarding the risks in the financial sector. So I would now ask Mr. Koszalski on that, how you see that in Poland.
Thank you. Many years ago, when I started my work at university, I was a teacher of accounting for 2 years. And I have understood that the balance is one of the more important findings in economics. So if we look at balances of our institutions in Poland, so we don't have green assets in our central bank balance, as well in our banking sector. We don't have green assets. We don't have big exposure to their green assets. So directly, we could say that the problem is there is no problem. But of course, we try to observe and monitor risk, as we have to reduce dependence on coal. So we try to observe the processes we have to do to limit the dependence on coal. But the question is asked during the pandemic crisis time. So I would like to say that the pandemic crisis has not endangered the financial stability. Fortunately, the financial sector had and has capacity to absorb even significant losses, and majority of banks had and has capacity to absorb credit loss because of pandemic crisis. So it is a good situation. In this year, even in the context of profitability, the situation is improving. So we've got stable banking sector, and there is a lack of financial imbalances. But of course, there are also we cannot forget that there are also some other risks. For example, the risk of the mortgage loans in foreign currency, slowdown in lending. But I think that it's not a problem for us as in the context of financing of green investment in the near future.
Thank you. That was very clear. And you also managed to respond quickly whether you have a green portfolio in central bank. So in the end, I will ask also your colleagues whether they do have this. But let me now give the floor to Deputy Governor Kandrach on the same question on risks in the financial sector coming from environment and changes to the climate.
Yes, thank you very much. And let me start with the reflection on Marek, because he mentioned that their approach, that they try to be an adaptive role within this road, and they started the work recently. Actually, our strategy is a little bit different, because we would like to be a pioneer, an accelerator as a central bank within this field, and due to this reason, actually we started the work in 2019 when we created a green program, and the reflection of Cesare what mentioned that we can be planned. And yes, indeed, I think this is a crucial element if how we deal with this new phenomenon or this new trend, which climate and green ideas mean. So actually, first, in 2019, we created a green program, and we started to go through this strategical document. And we also work on a climate stress test, a short-term and the long-term climate stress test, because we, as I mentioned to you, we believe in that the climate change poses significant risk to financial stability via the well-documented transition and physical effects. But and we have already carried out quite some work to underpin this conviction, and the most illustrative may be that we have yet preliminary but telling results of our long-term climate stress test, which means that the stress test results indicate that in a failed transition scenario, in which global greenhouse gas emission continue grow according to historical trends, the level of non-performing loan in the Hungarian financial system will more than double compared to transition scenarios. And we have two transition scenarios, an orderly transition and a disorderly transition. I think this is a very interesting result, but of course, as I mentioned to you, we are in the first phase, but we are working on that. And at the end of the year, I'm pretty sure that the long term and and the shorter scenario also be ready. Another tool what I would like to mention, because to be a pioneer, it means that we are trying to do a lot of things. Another example that we, in this year, we have issued a guide on climate-related and environmental risk that set out supervisory expectations and recommendations to banks with respect to management of these risks. So we are working on and we launched a recommendation. The third one, what I would like to mention to you as a good and very, very exciting example is we have a unique green preferential capital requirements program for certain green assets. It is basically a green supporting factor implemented in the Pillar 2 capital requirements for an increasing set of eligible assets, such as green bonds and energy efficient residential mortgages and renewable energy investment loans. And it is important to note that, of course, checks and balances are in place to prevent overheating. So the program, this program is kept and time-bound for 5 years. But through that, without harming our primary mandate and without harming the financial stability, I think that could be a good pilot example, and we would like to see how the banks would react on this carrot and not stick, because we can push the sectors towards, we can divert it, not just sticks but carrots also. And last but not least, I think, which is also very important, the communication among us. So that's why that in the previous 2 years we organized a CE Green Finance Supervisory Workshop for central banks and financial supervisors in this region, and we plan to do so this year as well, linked to our annual Central European Green Finance Conference, which will take place in the 1st of December. And we have a couple of other things, so green bond program and other things, but maybe these are the most relevant ones and important ones. And to reflect on also Ludovic and Marek, because as I mentioned to you, we would organize in December a Green Finance Conference. So don't worry to travel to Hungary, because the government also, or the governor also decided that all of the conferences which organized here in Budapest or in Hungary, the central bank, these are carbon neutral conferences. So always we calculate the CO2 emission of the travels and the whole organize, and then we compensate it into projects. So we decided to do that. So don't worry about the climate if you travel here, and I would like to see you face to face. And why I'm said also that, because I think this is another very good example what we can do as central banks to be a role model. For instance, to scrutinize our operation and be carbon neutral when we organize conferences, when we travel around the world. These things, it thinks just a little things, but as a central bank, I think our reputation help to accelerate the work, which again, I agree with all of you that the primary goal and the primary responsibility of this is connected to the government, but still we have a lot of very slightly and very small things what we can do, and after that we can be a role model and maybe push this whole idea towards the other ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Csaba. I think you captured it very well, that the MNB is a pioneer in the climate change area, and you are really motivating the central bank to also follow the good example. Yeah, you mentioned that this conference is carbon neutral, so I just have a glass of still water, which came in a glass bottle, so I think that's okay. And I can also mention to you, when I worked at the MNB, the Treasury Department belonged to me, and they had a very nice initiative among themselves. Whenever there was a business travel, they volunteered to offset the carbon emissions from their travel by donating basically funds to a fund which is planting trees. So our treasurers are very green, and that was an initiative which started on their own before the MNB actually moved to implementing a green bond portfolio. I think we have used most of our time, but I have one more very interesting question, and I would just ask you to respond very briefly on that, which is whether climate change is part of your monetary policy thinking. Is it part of your discussions when you are making your monetary policy decisions? Are there any tools which you are implementing in reaction to that? And maybe finally, whether you are when you are communicating your monetary policy steps and programs, are there any arguments which relate to climate change, or which underpin or explain your decisions with arguments which are related to climate change? I know it's a lot, so maybe you can respond with yes and no, or just extend with 2 or 3 sentences. Again, I would ask Csaba first, please.
Okay, so very briefly, the answer is yes. So as I mentioned to you, this some kind of evolution here in the central bank, because within the supervisory part of the central bank, we started this work. Then we hired people, and now 12 dedicated professionals working on the different kind of measures what I mentioned to you. But now, and this is quite fresh, that the monetary part of the central bank also react on this phenomena, and our colleagues are also working hard to integrate green aspects in the monetary policy toolkit. There are quite some initiatives on the designing table, while some others are more advanced, such as the green covered bond purchase program, or preferential refinancing conditions for energy efficient housing loans, that so-called green home program. So maybe these are the most relevant, and we also working on a TCFD report, which deeply would scrutinize the whole activity of the central bank within the monetary policy field and the other ones also. This will come the next year, March, I think, the final report. So actually, yes, the monetary policy is also quite active. Thank you
very much. Let's move on to Poland. Are climate change considerations part of your monetary policy discussions, considerations, and communication?
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. According to our predictions, energy prices will add around 0.5 percentage point to inflation in the years to come. And it is obviously our legal duty to ensure price stability. So the answer is definitely yes. But my look and transition into a greener economy from the perspective of monetary policy follows from the Polish energy strategy. And according to our strategy, we have to have in our energy mix a nuclear strategy. It means a huge investment in nuclear energy plants. We also must focus on renewable energy, I mean wind energy, solar energy. There are also many modernization investment in gas energy ahead of us, as we are moving away from coal, and definitely it will take us many years to have nuclear energy and significantly higher share of renewable energy. But all of this has consequences for level of prices. That's why it is a matter of our discussion during the meetings of our Monetary Policy Council.
Thank you. That's very clear from an inflation target central bank. Let's move on to Ludovic.
The short answer is not yet, which means that the ECB, we just completed the strategy review of monetary policy, and there is a section devoted to climate change, and there is an action plan related to that. So I expect that in the future, more and more green aspects will be integrated into the monetary policy framework. We will start with corporate purchase programs, collateral policy, data requirements from the institution. So that is a kind of a starting point we have right now. And as also others said, from a pure inflation perspective, we are looking into the effects of all those potential carbon taxes on inflation figures. But definitely there is more in the pipeline right now. And just a final thing, next time I can go by bicycle from Bratislava to Budapest. There is a nice trail there, so a lot of carbon emissions will be saved. If you organize a conference during summer, that will be fine, but in winter it can be a bit problematic.
Thank you. That was interesting that you highlighted the carbon taxes, which also filter into forecasts on inflation and obviously monetary policy considerations. I think it's a good idea if you come by bike, but let's start first with a tour around Lake Balaton. We call it Ultra Balaton. You can do it on bike, and actually you can do it on foot if you are an ultra runner. And the MNB is also a pioneer on this. We have been doing it many times, of course not as individuals, but as a team. You are more than welcome to join us in future years. Marek, we have the pleasure to finish with your words this panel discussion. So maybe if you could just summarize how you see and how you treat climate change considerations in your monetary policy discussions, decisions, and communication.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm also a biker, but I'm afraid that I would not make it from Prague to Budapest. So don't count on me in biking. Now, on your question, yes, certainly monetary policy takes into account all developments relevant for price changes, and obviously policies combating the climate change will certainly have an impact. It was mentioned by my predecessor. I would even say massive impact on price development, especially the transition towards greener economy will make a big difference. If you, for instance, look at the package proposed yesterday by the Commission, I think it is quite obvious. So obviously we do take these things into account as well. But we don't have any explicit instruments in our monetary policy, no explicit, green instruments, and we also do not have explicit communication to this end. We don't communicate any kind of green agenda linked to our monetary policy.
Thank you for the very concise but still sharp answer. I think all your inputs highlighted how important climate change considerations are for us, but it's very clear that you see central banks' role quite differently, but all countries are dealing with it. But some of you see that it's more the role of governments to deal with climate change, also in the financial sector, to provide incentives. But some of you also highlighted central banks' role to play here. And I would see that there is a divide whether you are a supervisor of the central bank or not. Maybe supervisors have more of a role to play here. I would stop with this conclusion, but I think there is merit in continuing this discussion. So you are already invited to our next Visegrad Group conference, and I trust that green finance, climate change will be also part of our future discussions. Thank you very, very much for your valuable inputs and for attending this virtual conference.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you very
much.
much for inviting us.
We're very happy to have you all here, and thank you very much, Mr. Palotai. This was indeed a dynamic discussion, and we heard several inspiring ideas from our speakers. As our first discussion ended, we moved to the next session, focusing on green renewal after the pandemic. Following the break, our speakers will discuss the increasing importance of green aspects in the crisis management and in the future of our economies.
Needs to do more in this regard. And Hungary, as well as MNB, must play its part in these efforts. According to an international survey, our country is currently the 19th amongst the European Union countries in terms of progress towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We still have much to accomplish in terms of clean energy, tackling climate change, and the protection of terrestrial ecosystems. In addition, relative to other European Union countries, our economy is more vulnerable to environmental issues. All this clearly shows that we must restructure our economy, in which MNB plays a key role by facilitating the financing of investments. We must support the adaptation of the economy and mitigate the consequences of climate change, as well as reduce the funding of activities harmful to the environment. To this end, in 2019, MNB established the Green Programme to support the domestic financial sector in measuring, managing, and reducing the risks arising from climate change and other environmental degradation. We formulated new recommendations and regulations to reduce these risks, as well as to expand green finance. Furthermore, 2020 saw the introduction of an innovative preferential capital treatment for housing loans to enable commercial banks to provide favorable mortgage loans for energy-efficient properties. In the corporate segment, MNB has been focusing on renewable energy and corporate green bonds by expanding the preferential treatment scheme, while also placing special emphasis on capacity building. The Green Programme is also aimed at providing market players with an appropriate supply of professionals and expertise. In this regard, MNB is cooperating with various organizations to support multiple domestic and international training programs. And thanks to its professional assistance, 4 Hungarian universities have launched green finance courses. Apart from MNB's measures, the European Union regulations and global initiatives are also rapidly shaping our lives. The changes which have been set in motion might allow us to leave the planet in a better shape for the future generations.
Geopolitics, History, Economics. The book titled American Empire versus European Dream by György Matolcsy, the governor of the Central Bank of Hungary, has been released. Providing a broad perspective, it analyzes the process of how the American empire became the world's #1 superpower. What motivations other major players in geopolitics had. How the European Union attempted to compensate the hegemon status of the American empire. And how the European dream shattered at the dawn of a new world order. You can find the answers to these questions, as well as many important and topical issues, in György Matolcsy's new book, which has already achieved international success. The book is available in bookstores or online, in the webshop of Paulus Athénée Publishing House, or on Amazon.com.
Dear all, thank you for staying with us and warm welcome for those who have just joined in. The forum continues with its second session titled Green Renewal After COVID-19. And as the title suggests, its central question is enhancing a sustainable economic recovery after the pandemic.
Green renewal after COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic caused severe socio-economic damages, but it also created momentum for a green recovery and sustainable development. To be able to live up to this potential, green investment should become top priorities to build back better. Government should find the right balance between short-term progress like job creation and long-term objectives like reaching a low-carbon economy. There is a broad consensus that a more effective coordination is required between fiscal, monetary, and industrial policies to support green innovation. Where does the EU stand concerning the transition to a more sustainable future? How can the V4 countries preserve their competitiveness while taking part in this renewal process? How can economic policy facilitate the channeling of capital into green investments?
Joining me on stage, please welcome Mr. György Barca, Board Alternate Director of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, who will moderate the discussion on green renewal. Let me also introduce the participants of the panel discussion, Mr. Artur Bobovnicki, Director of Innovations and International Cooperation, Slovak Innovation and Energy Agency from Slovakia. Mr. Zdeněk Čech, Head of Economic Analysis Section, European Commission Representation in Slovakia from the Czech Republic. Mr. Krzysztof Senger, Managing Director, International Business and Relations, Bank Gospodarstwa Krajowego from Poland. Mr. Attila Steiner, State Secretary for the Development of Circular Economy, Energy and Climate Policy, Ministry for Innovation and Technology from Hungary. I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Barca and our distinguished speakers.
Thank you very much. I would also like to welcome all the guests we have and the speakers, and also would like to say thank you to the Central Bank of Hungary and the V4 central banks and to Governor Matolcsi for organizing this event. First, I would like to have a general question to all of you about the most urgent challenges you see in the COVID-19 recovery process we see now. I would like to ask the answers in the order of alphabetic order. So Arthur, could you please answer first? Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me for participate on the event. From my point of view, the European Green Deal, a set of goals that has been presented by the Commission yesterday, the challenge why. The extinction of species by human activity continues to accelerate. Not enough to eliminate more than half of species by the end of this century, according to our geological. It will be time when today's toddlers will be seniors. The last time the Earth experienced an extinction of this magnitude was 65 million years ago. We have to cut the emissions of global warming gases 45% from 2010 level, and we only have 10 to 12 years to make it happen. This will require a transformation of our global economy and society and our very way of life without precedent in human history. The human race faces a razor-thin timeline for radical reorientation of civilization. And what we see among wide spectrum of political parties here in Central and Eastern Europe, resistance to this goal. At least yesterday I saw this in the Czech TV, and I think it will be similar to in other countries. Who is resistant? Who are resistant? Surprisingly, young politicians too. So our greatest challenge is to raise understanding the consequences of global warming, understanding that we have chance right now, and understanding that only those nations that will hold on this unprecedented economic chance will be future winners. We have undisputable obligation to the next generation, and to make things that we see as necessary. We have goals, we have a roadmap, and we have resources. So now we just must start doing things. And regarding the post-COVID, post-COVID environment is very suitable for achieving this goal. We have seen impact of unexpected threat. Climate change will be much worse than COVID. So the question is not yes or no, but how to do it and how quickly we can do it. So this is our greatest challenge from my point of view.
Thank you. Zdenek, next, please.
So thank you very much for invitation to this event. I'm very much honored to be part of discussions, and it's very topical. And as you know, that yesterday the Commission presented its Fit for 55 package, so it's also a very timely discussion, and I think we will be able to revert to this. So, but I'm directly coming back, you know, to answer your questions. What are the most urgent challenges in the post-COVID recovery? So I think that actually the business and consumers have already somehow adapted, you know, to go better with the containment measures, though some sectors, as you know, across the Europe, the tourism and in-person services, you know, suffered a lot. So I mean, from this point of view, the V4 is with the high share of manufacturing industries in the output is doing relatively well, you know. So we in our Commission forecast we expect that actually most of the V4 countries will already regain its pre-pandemic size already in 2021. You know, so I mean 3 countries: Slovakia, Poland, and Hungary. Czechia will join them in the course of the next year. And but my second point is on that there is still, you know, very high uncertainty regarding the economic outlook. You see it now with the anti-pandemic measures across the Europe, and we will see what will happen with the Delta variant and with other COVID variants coming up. You know, so I mean that the word to underline is the very high uncertainty, and for sure the vaccination rates will play a very important role going forward. But my third point is that with this, I mean, very solid recovery. I mean, the Commission in the summer forecast, predicts for the 2021 4.8 growth in the EU and 4.5 this year and 4.5 next year. But this is still, I mean, hinging on many assumptions, and the recovery is still fragile. So actually, my key point is that there is still the policy will continue to matter, and actually that the EU will still is shifting, from the kind of mode of fighting the crisis into more long-term mode, and actually that I mean, this was already shown in the previous discussions that I mean there will be, I mean, there is much thinking about the right timing of withdrawing the policy stimulus. But I mean, what is important is that actually we have also now in the Commission launch, and it was also previously discussed, the so-called recovery and resilience facility, and this is currently being implemented, and actually this can help, this policy effort can help, to bridge, into the longer term, and actually address the longer term challenges that the longer term challenges that the European economy is facing. And this is not only in the area of the green transition, but this is also in the area of digital transition, that actually 40% of people in the EU still is lacking, the digital skills, and for instance, only 20% of less than 20% of SMEs is using the cloud services, and still 25% of households do not have access to broadband. So this will need to be changed. So actually, this massive support at the EU level may also help, to restart, the EU economy going forward. And my last point is that the effort is not only on the side of investments or demand stimulus, but this is also on the reform side, and this is very, very important part of the package that the EU is striving, to reform economies, to become more resilient, over the longer term.
Thank you. So, Christoph, next, please.
Yes, good morning, and thank you for the invitation. So first of all, I think that keeping the momentum for sustainable development and sustainable finance after the post-COVID area is very crucial to the recovery and building new green economy. So I see two dimensions of the most urgent challenges. First is for the global economy. So aligning recovery strategies with the sustainable development goals is very crucial for us, because emerging markets and their alignment with sustainable development is crucial, and we will also be interconnected in terms of economy, trade, and so forth in the EU and Visegrad countries as well. So we need to remember that the sustainable development goals are still to be achieved, and emerging markets will be also crucial for us in terms of their way to recovery, their way to getting back on the growth path. And then the second dimension is very interconnected, keeping the productivity at the business level. And we see this with partners, with companies that we work, that productivity levels, keeping the momentum for trade across the world is very important. We provide finance in more than 70 countries at the moment, and we see that foreign expansion for companies that from the Central Eastern Europe is the next wave of development of the companies. So both global economy, sustainable development goals, ability of emerging markets to import from our countries and keeping the momentum, finding the way of financing trade is crucial. And in terms of greener economy, putting emphasis on investing in emerging markets, in greener businesses, in greener infrastructure also would be the key. And we need to join forces to help them to transition also to green economy. That would be my take on the first question. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. Attila, next please.
Good morning, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank the Central Bank of Hungary to organize this very important discussion on green transition. On the question, I think during the last decade, European countries and the European Union itself has been in a constant crisis handling mode. And what we can also expect in the future, several unexpected challenges and changes. So therefore, I'm convinced that the resilience of the European Union and of the member states shall be strengthened, and that will be crucial in the future. And of course, one of the key challenges, this is climate change, and how to build up a structure and a governance system to cope with the climate change challenge in a way that it is also acceptable and bearable for industries and also for citizens. I think that will be the key challenge in the future after the COVID pandemic, since the challenge is huge. For example, in Hungary, almost each household is connected somehow to the natural gas system, and natural gas is the main heating fuel in Hungary. But if we are serious about 2050 climate neutrality objective, that means that basically we have to completely abandon natural gas from the Hungarian heating system. So that shows also the scale of the challenge. And of course, the huge investment needs to be able to implement this transition. And I think the key challenge will be, so basically how to be able to decouple the emissions and the GDP growth and the economic development. I think, of course, now we have targets and we have the new package of the European Commission, the Fit for 55 package, as it was mentioned and published yesterday, which is a very important framework for that. But finally, of course, the success factor will be whether we will be able to implement those targets, and of course, what will be the cost of those targets and the implementation, and how it will impact the competitiveness of European industries and national industries, and also to make the green transition bearable also for the citizens. So this is, I think, the key challenge what we have ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Attila. I have heard that the main focus is on the recovery and the growth, where we can be somewhat optimistic, but there are still high uncertainties because of the COVID, and the climate goals are definitely more important this time during this recovery process. So I would like to go one step further into the deep details. Could you please elaborate about how do you see these two things, two goals? One is the recovery and growth. A second is the transition to green and climate. So these two goals can be harmonized. And I would like also you to share some of your views. How do you think these goals can be achieved? So what kind of tools with your institutions or with other institutions can you foresee to help the process? Thank you. And please, I would like to ask again Arthur first. Thanks.
Looking on the sectors or areas where the green has the biggest potential, I think there are all sectors without difference. IT as well as agriculture, heavy industry as well as transportation, power generation and building, hospitality as well as the chemistry. The green transition is going hand in hand with digital transition, and that is something which we have to better understand and cope with that. Harmonization is something which I think precisely yesterday's Commission with the European Green Deal presented is something what should be done across the member states, and it must be done on the way as we are doing at this moment some other things. We are, for example, having concerted action on renewable energy sources, which is joint initiative of 28 member states, 27 member states, working on preparing new legislation on renewable energy sources. Similar it is with energy efficiency. So we have to do it all together as a union, as a 27 countries working together to achieve the goals. So harmonization should be done together via joint policies and joint strategies. Of course, harmonization is very important in power generation and power distribution, especially when the number of the renewable energy sources connected to the grid is going to increase. And stability of the system is something which is utmost important. We saw it several months ago with the problems in Balkan, resulting in very dangerous situation in Central Europe. And this must be really well harmonized. Regarding our position and what we are doing, our institution or our agency is at this moment charged to build understanding and awareness of renewable energy sources and energy efficiency among the general public as well as among the professionals. And we have to support innovation. We still have some road to go to make these things happen, to be interlinked, innovation and energy, and even better communicated as well. But recently we managed to do some step ahead to be more innovative, energy-related and interlinked agency. We are responsible for IPCEI hydrogen project, which is totally green and totally or completely innovative project. And this is our role for the future, being the proponent of solutions that will support all European initiatives and bring tools enabling these initiatives to happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Zdenek, please.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you ask whether, I mean, the compatibility of the green investments with the recovery. I think it is already happening. You know, I mean, I gave the example of the recovery and resilience plan. The Slovakia assigned already to climate objectives in terms of the spending in its plan 43%, which is above the 37% benchmark that is actually required by the regulation. And you see in the number of across the region and across the EU that actually the member states are actually going some far beyond, you know, this 37% requirement. And I think it's actually for I think it's actually the opportunity that actually, I mean, the turning, you know, the crisis into the opportunity for the investments. And actually this is very much happening along the number of working streams, you know, that was already mentioned, you know, including the sustainable finance. But I mean, just if you look at the region, you need to look at basically through three key challenges. I mean, the three challenges are reduce the CO2 emissions. The second challenge is to replace fossil fuels with the fossil fuels for production. And the third is they actually define the new product pathways, lowering the CO2 footprint. And I think that there is pretty much recognition on the first 2 points in the Visegrad Group, but I think there's still, you know, some kind of not really full recognition on this third point, you know, including And I think that the member states can still do more. I mean, in the CE could do more, for instance, on the circular economy. But I think it will come. You know, it will. It's a matter of time. I'm positive. I'm positive on this. And actually, what is I think important is that actually, as regards the green investment, the speed of decarbonization will pretty much hinge upon the availability of mature technology and ability to scale up, you know, the investments. You know, so also it holds for V4, and as you see that also including the Fit for 55 package, you know, basically the renewable penetration will need to double over the next decade until 2030 to reach the. I mean, if the new target 40% on renewables by 2030 is agreed upon. So I mean, but the technology is there, you know. So it's only about the scaling up the investment, for instance. But for transportation, it is a bit more difficult. V4 is you know, with the car production, it's, I mean, the Slovakia, Czech Republic, these are, I mean, world champions per capita in terms of the cars production. And so it will take more time to set up the supply chains from mining of raw materials, you know, to assembly of the EVs. And for buildings, I mean, the technology is also there. I mean, but it pretty much depends on. But the scale of building renewal is huge. But I mean, this is also reflected in the recovery plans. For instance, Slovakia directly or indirectly, I mean, 2 billion euros is actually directed, you know, to buildings. So there is also much help from the EU to renew the buildings. So actually, the bottom line is that the most required technology is there. But what will matter is the access to innovations and actually making the investment case. But I think it will be for our later interventions, you know.
Thank you very much, Zdeněk. Christoph, please.
Yes, I think David, giving the example of from our economy and what would be the key, you know, to recover and what to concentrate on. For us, most of the emission reduction will take place in the energy sector. So that's the short-term priority, but in very long term, the role of this sector in the overall decarbonization effort will increase over time. So a lot of, as has been already said, a lot of effort would need to be put on innovation, investing in new technologies to decarbonize other parts of the economy. Pro-consumer sectors would be very crucial for the effort as well. For now, the sector will be responsible for 80% of total emission reductions by 2030, and 55% of reduction by 2050. So a lot of efforts would be in the energy sector. This would be quite costly and would be dependent on greenhouse gases mitigation in industry, transport and agriculture in this period for sure. But this transition requires introduction of necessary technological processes and a lot of investments, also foreign direct investments in could help in this reduction. We foresee, for example, transport, agriculture, and energy-intensive industries to be very attractive for foreign direct investments. The largest green potential has following sectors. I think that power generation from renewable energy is one of the crucial. But in terms of Poland and the pipeline, the key would be building a new offshore wind projects. That is something that would require a global investment community as well. We are on the way in terms of zero emission public transport. That's something that we are now working very deeply and financing it. But circular economy for sure is something, and this already is shown by the changing consumer behaviors during the pandemic, would be very crucial as well. So huge investment, but also focusing on client experience, green client experience, it would be crucial for green investments in short term. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. Attila, please.
Thank you. Of course, we have in the V4 countries different energy mixes. However, of course, the big emitter sectors are quite the same. In Hungary also, power generation. We have currently still one big lignite-fired power plant, which we would like to transform into a gas-fired power plant. And by this transition alone, we would save very significant emission numbers. So basically, this is the largest project in Hungary, which would cut CO2 emissions. It would cut approximately 10% of the Hungarian CO2 emission, only this project. And of course, in the meantime, we would like to also have a power generation portfolio where by 2030, 90% of the generation will come from CO2 emission-free technologies, mainly two pillars. One pillar is nuclear. We would like to maintain the existing nuclear capacity for the long term, and the other half will come from renewables, where mainly solar panels have the biggest potential in Hungary. But of course, additionally, geothermal, biomass, it will be also important. But the biggest scale will be solar energy generation. And one additional sector is the transport sector, which is responsible for 20% of the emissions in Hungary. And here I think it's a very good example how to couple economic growth and green transition, since we have also automotive factories in Hungary and also some bus manufacturers. And actually also from the Recovery and Resilience Facility, we would like to promote electromobility. And we will start extensive green bus program starting at the end of this year. And of course, that could also help us to develop Hungarian economy and Hungarian industry in the meantime. Maybe one interesting topic is how to position ourselves in this technology development. And we just finished recently on the so-called National Clean Development Strategy, which is basically the path how to reach 2050 climate neutrality and what will be the overall impact on different sectors and on society. And we have here several scenarios, and actually between the scenarios we have the dilemma whether to be a front runner also on developing these new technologies and to help industry to develop, which will be a quite expensive exercise. In another scenario, we have the option to wait until others will develop those technologies, and the technologies will be mature at a time, and it will be more cheaper than buying those technologies at the beginning. However, of course, in this case, there is no chance to develop our economy in such a pace as in the other scenario. So I think this is a very interesting dilemma. We do not have the right answer, which is the right path, but in this strategy, we wanted to highlight this dilemma, which will be, I think, very important for several countries. And of course, as a government, we have several legislative tools to create incentives and legislative framework, and also to form support schemes, and also to distribute the funding, which is also available from Recovery and Resilience Facility, but also from the traditional MFF, the operational programs, which can also help us a lot to reach our objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attila. I have heard many things, which I'm grateful for. First, I think you mentioned a lot of areas where green investments can take place, from power generation to energy efficiency, digital transformations, and several others. And as we all know, I think that manufacturing, and especially car manufacturing, is very important to our countries, as many of you mentioned. I also heard that this process requires a wider cooperation between countries, especially with a focus on EU plans and the EU institutions. And I also heard that technology for the green transition is generally available. We can probably say this, but there are two important issues here. One is the access to technologies. How can our countries or other institutions can have access to the most modern technologies, and the second is the scale of investments. And as most of you mentioned, there are recovery plans which are quite ambitious in terms of green investment share. I would like to go one step further, which could mean the role of development institutions, both probably international and national level. I would be grateful if you could comment, share your views about the role of development institutions and probably your institutions. And because we are a bit running late, I would also connect this question to your view, to probably the probability to reach the Paris Agreement targets, which are probably quite ambitious. How you see the success, the likelihood of success to reach very ambitious targets by 2030 or by 2050. What could be the challenges for this? Thank you. Arthur, please.
Okay, I will just keep the role of our agency, because I already mentioned some of these things, what we are doing and where we see the role in the near future. I will just try to focus a little bit on the Paris Agreement target. I think we simply have to pursue the European Green Deal. This is not just economic or energy-related policy. It is socio-economic plan. And I think it's very similar to the New Deal known from the US, which has brought millions of new jobs to the country. The New Deal was a series of programs, initiatives instituted during the Great Depression by President Franklin D. Roosevelt that aimed to restore the American prosperity. What Roosevelt made in 1933, it was acting swiftly to stabilize the economy. And I think the word swiftly is something which has to be underlined in the context of European Union, Europe, and global view as well. Not incidentally, I think European Green Deal is using the similar wording to evoke the urgency, to evoke the need to act, because continuing in the past way would ruin this planet irreversibly. So we have to act swiftly and stop disputing and arguing that China is lagging behind, the US is lagging behind. They are working. They are working on the similar programs, and their economies will benefit once this will become more visible. So we can't stop and wait. We have to mobilize the human power, human brains, and financial resources backed by huge European economy. That's why Europe is now running a series of IPCEI projects, whether it's hydrogen, microelectronics, industrial cloud. This is something which is bringing together our brains and trying to push economies and push the new technologies that will bring or will deliver the goals closer to the needed result. Because whether we like it or dislike it, the old trajectories of the greenhouse gas emission and with the current policies are not showing the results which we want to see according to Paris Agreement. So we have to change the things. That's why European Union is doing a lot of things, and we have to support that. Whether it is whether we are innovation agency, whether we are banks, whether we are ministries, we have to support the goals which are in front of us with a much more, to say, I don't want to repeat swiftly, with flexibility and real urgency in mind. This is what we need now to achieve and to reach the Paris Agreement target.
Great. Thank you very much, Artur. Zdenek, please.
I will answer telegraphically in along two lines. One is on the role of my institutions in this, green process, and the second on the prospects of the CEE or V4. So the first on the role of my institutions, I think that, politically, the Green Deal is embedded at the heart of the current Commission of President von der Leyen. The Green Deal was announced in December 2019, and since then we made several steps towards progressing along the lines, for instance, EU Green Deal investment plan in January 2020. I mentioned the recovery plans. There is a very important work stream along the lines on the renew sustainable finance strategy, and the European green and bond standards actually were published last week. As mentioned, the huge release is one of the biggest legislative packages of the current Commission, published just yesterday on the Fit for 55. And actually, this is going directly, to the heart of your question. This is actually making the necessary adjustments, to achieve the targets for Europe, this minus 55 and the climate neutrality by 2015 in time. Without implementing this, we will not achieve. As Vice President Timmermans says, more of the same will not do the same thing. We need to change the course of some things. So this is on the role of my institution. The second on the V4 or CEE, as it was mentioned, there is a very huge, high share of industry. It was also mentioned on the car manufacturing, automotive. I think we did some research in the Commission, and actually we saw that there is a strongly picking up the rates of robotization and automatization. So I would not be that skeptic, on the job losses, because anyway, the automation would actually dent a part of the jobs in the future, also in the V4 region. Actually, very strong rise, Slovakia had, and also Hungary, over recent year in terms of the robotization. But actually to turn it into an opportunity, just to explore new technologies, and actually there will be a lot of technologies will need to be manufactured. Actually, this is the opportunity, great opportunity for V4, and I'm convinced about that. So actually, as I said, to convert the green proceedings into the opportunity for V4 is doable. And in terms of the EU financing, I just would like to stress, and this is the last point, that actually this is, the region is very much supported. From the structural funds, from the Just Transition Fund, one third of the Pillar 1 Just Transition Fund is going, into Visegrad Four. 13% of the Recovery Resilience Funds is also going in terms of grants, to the Visegrad Fund. And finally, the last mention on the Fit for 55 package, there is effort sharing regulation that is also taking into account, the GDP per capita and the living standards, and we are proposing also the carbon border adjustment mechanisms, to keep the level playing field in terms of the competitiveness for the industry. And if this still not works, then the Commission is proposing in the terms of the Fit for 55 the new social climate fund that will help the most vulnerable.
Thank you very much, Zdenek. Christoph, please.
So I think that national promotional banks and BGK have an essential driving role to play to fostering the development of sustainable finance and availability of the instruments, and BGK recognizes that and the need of the economic industries. And on this basis, we are developing programs that are based on our new strategy and our business model. So we are concentrating now as well to finance unconventional future-proof projects regarding advanced technologies, development of hydrogen fuels, for example, or water resources management, and the development of carbon technologies. So we are putting an effort to come up with financial solutions for those sectors. And for example, we support sustainable development programs through ESG loans, in which the cost of finance are reduced when the investment has got a positive impact on the environment. So, for example, financing the first social responsibility loan in the Polish energy sector, granted to one of the companies in cooperation with other banks, and working with other banks is very crucial for us, since this is the effort of the whole financial sector, and the role of banks such as ours is to accelerate the role of the also commercial banks, which they play on ESG. And in terms of Paris Agreement, I think that it's still on the track, but a lot of investment in technologies and technologies that are speeding up the process of scaling down the emissions is the key. So not only policies, but from the business and technology availability is the crucial thing to have this in order. So that's my take.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Attila, please.
Thank you. With regards to the fulfillment of the Paris Agreement, I'm slightly optimistic. I think during the last years, several significant positive developments happened, and several member states and also the European Union realized that it's also an opportunity for them, not only a burden. On the other side, I think it's very important that among member states there is a bigger convergence. I was also surprised to see the actual performances of different member states, and there are some member states which even increased their emissions, some of them by 15% to the reference year. So if, of course, we would like to be carbon neutral by 2050, this is not acceptable. So therefore, to reach somehow bigger convergence, this is very important. I think in terms of Hungary, we are in quite a good situation. Compared to the reference year, we managed to cut emissions by 32%. And we are also very committed to reach climate neutrality. Actually, that was also enshrined into national law. So we have also a Hungarian national legal obligation. And in the meantime, of course, we have also the European Climate Act, which is also legally binding. So I think it's very important to have a transparent path and clear strategies and clear targets. What is the long-term target, but also how to achieve this long-term target and to have interim targets. And I think also it's crucial during the implementation that everybody should be on board. And governments, industries, but also citizens. And in order to have that, I think we have to consider also some aspects like competitiveness, for example, security of supply of energy, and also affordable energy prices. Because if we do not consider those aspects, then very easily we could lose the public support for a green transition. And of course, to realize that, we need huge investments and therefore financial resources. Now we talked more about EU funds, but also national funds, and also the funds from or financial resources from the private sector is very important. And of course, here governments have also a very important role to mobilize and leverage also private financing. We have here quite good experiences. We issued 3 times green bonds, and that was a huge success. Last time this April, and there was a 7 times more demand for the bonds which were issued. So I think if you have a transparent policy or a clear strategy with clear interim targets, then actually funds will be available. But of course, in the meantime, we have to avoid that we use different funds for the same project. So therefore, somehow to avoid the competition of the funds, I think that needs some careful consideration, but we are working on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attila, and thank you all for your comments. Just as a quick summary for this your last answers, I like the comment that there is an urgency in time because of the ambition, and we have to set aside the disputes. We should not fear from automatization. I also like that comment because I think we all have some kind of fear because of the car manufacturing reliance. And there is this usual challenge, how the long-term targets can be comparable and measurable via medium or short-term targets. I think we can probably all agree that the start is encouraging, including this conference. And I would like to thank you all, to Artur, Zdenek, Christoph, and Attila for your contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barta, for moderating this intriguing discussion, and thank you all for the panelists for introducing us to the future of green economy. As our conference is about to end, once again, I thank all of our speakers and participants for sharing their great insights, and our audience for staying with us during the program. If you missed any of the speeches or discussions, make sure to return to the YouTube channel of Magyar Nemzeti Bank, where the whole conference will be available to rewatch. The channel also features videos and previous MNB events and other informative materials for gaining deeper insight to the central bank policies. Drawing the conclusion of our session today, I believe we all learned from the messages about the importance of sustainability and our role in establishing a greener future. Furthermore, our speakers have introduced us to the several region-specific aspects. Therefore, the conference made a worthy contribution to the celebration of the 30th anniversary of the Visegrad Group. I believe the speeches and professional sessions have paved the way for further discussions on those timely questions. Before saying goodbye, I have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Mihály Patay, Deputy Governor of Magyar Nemzeti Bank, on stage. I would like to invite Deputy Governor Patay to deliver his closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this was really an interesting morning. We agree, all of us. It was, the ideas was excellent. I liked very much that there was no unity in ideas. This is very important if you have a conference, that there are several attitudes and several solutions might be found in the future. So if you allow me, I shy away from wrapping up because I am not prepared intellectually to wrapping up such a rich agenda. I just would like to thank, first of all, the keynote speakers or governors, Ms. Knightley, Mr. Kazimir, Mr. Rushnok, and of course, our boss, Mr. Matolcsi, for giving a good foundation for this morning. I would like to thank to the panelists, they were excellent, and to the two coordinators. If you allow me, I would like to highlight from the governor's speeches and from the first panel one issue which would be important for all of us. All the governors and all the panelists in the first round, they agreed that this green agenda must be dealt with the central banks as well. So this must be on the agenda of the central bank policies. I didn't see an agreement how we will solve this issue, because there was some difference in agreement, because the attitudes are different. But I believe that for further discussion, the room is there, and through experiments we will find, if not a common solution, but quite similar solutions in different countries. From the second panel, I had two buzzwords. Mr. Barca has made an excellent summing up, but the two buzzwords are for me that the crisis created opportunity for green and digital agenda, which we should use. And the other buzzword was that probably international solutions, the international framework is the only one where we can find the solutions. In national framework, the solutions will be harder to find. And then allow me a subjective note at the end regarding this green agenda, because I was observing practically in the last 45, 50 years this issue. 45 years ago, exactly 46 years ago at the university I was attending, there was a grassroots movement among Hungarian young ladies and gentlemen to get out from Budapest and buy cheap farms and live in the farms. A famous rock star was the face of this movement. We called them late hippies. Of course, for them, the only thing was to get closer to the nature and live a natural life. This was a grassroots movement, and all over Europe this has happened. Later, 30 years ago, I had an experience in Washington, annual meeting of the IMF and the World Bank. It was in 90 or 91. We couldn't get into the buildings because on the 19th Street, a couple of hundred youngsters were in animal costumes lying on the street, and they were chained together. And I have heard that these are NGO participants. I didn't know what NGO is, and then I was told what NGO is, and it was a Greenpeace operation. And I have discovered that this is already an organized something. 20 years ago, all the Hungarians were very proud that the German foreign minister is Hungarian-born. Joschka Fischer was the head of a coalition party in Germany. So it was already on a really strong political level, this agenda. And today, you know, it's one of the two mega trends. Other one is the digitalization. So this green agenda combined and converted into sustainability business, this is unavoidable for practically for everyone. And today's conference was just a proof that central banks has to deal with it. As for Hungary is concerned, we are lucky because the Hungarian Central Bank got a new mandate from the Hungarian Parliament 4 weeks ago. So practically for us, there is no, point of return, because from August 2nd, officially, the law says, the central bank law says, that the Hungarian Central Bank, beside the three classical mandates, which is price stability, financial sector supervision, and supporting the government policies, the fourth one is to enhance the green and sustainable development of the Hungarian economy and the Hungarian society. Also, for us, we have crossed the Rubicon, alea iacta est, there is no way back. So we try to do our best and work on this new force mandate. The last point is thank you for the organizers. It was excellent. Everybody who participated, thank you very much. And thank you for the audience, of course. So I wish you a good summer, good health, and good luck. Thank you very much for listening and for coming.
Thank you very much, Deputy Governor Patai, for your very wise words. This was indeed an excellent conclusion for our event. With the closing remarks of Dr. Patai, our conference has ended. I wish you all a pleasant day. Stay safe and healthy, and I hope we meet again at our next conference. Thank you for following the event. Goodbye.